And today is going to be a really popular episode. I have had a lot of requests for this, and I'm going to be talking about PMDD, PMS, and the mind-body connection with the lovely Hannah Studley. But just to introduce you to this wonderful woman, she has been coaching and counselling people for over 30 years. Surviving 3 violent muggings and recovering from severe PTSD in the 1980s, Hannah went on to have a very successful Academy Award-winning career in Hollywood. And then after graduating from the One Thought Institute in 2018, she has been leading the way in pioneering work with the 3 principles to the mind-body connection. Most recently, she's been working with people with long COVID and hormone distress. Hannah is a World Health Organization psychological first responder. She has a diploma in psychology and is a certified life coach. She's also a successful entrepreneur and author. Her first book, The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, is a novel about PSTD, Hollywood, and healing, and that came out in 2019. Her second book is The Painless, a novel about chronic pain and the mind-body connection, which was published in 2021. And her very latest book, Very Well, a novel about hormones, women, and why food was wrong, was released February this year. So you have been so busy by the sounds of it.
I know. I'm tired just listening. I'm like, God, did I do all that?
Did I do all that? I mean, like, one book is a big defeat. I've been thinking about a book for a while and it's just been in the thoughts. So yeah. And as I mentioned before we started recording, I'm really excited about this episode because PMDD and women's hormones is my specialty as an Ayurveda and women's health practitioner. So I love speaking to other practitioners about this. It's just can geek out on this all day. So I think it's going to be really fun and yeah, a lot of good wisdom for all of the women out there as well. So to kick off the episode, I always start with my rapid inspiration question. So can you first surprise us? I usually say inspire us, but today surprise came out. Surprise us with what your superpower is.
Ooh, my superpower. That's a great question. My superpower is knowing that I can never be broken and that no one else can get inside my head. It feels like they do sometimes, but I'm only ever feeling my thinking. So I'm feeling my thinking about you or whatever it is. And when you know that, that is freedom, because then you're not a victim of your circumstances anymore. So yeah, there you go.
Amazing. And I would love to dive into what you just said later as well, so we can get even deeper on that. And what is your favorite quote or mantra?
Oh, that's easy. My teacher, Sydney Banks, he's passed away now. I actually didn't meet him, but all my teachers met him. And his most famous quote is, if only people could learn not to be afraid of their own experience, that would change the world.
I love
and it's changed mine.
I love that. Yeah. Wow. Mm-hmm. And who or what is inspiring you at the moment?
Oh, it's always my clients. Oh gosh, I just wanted to cry right then. The people I speak to are so inspiring. They're so brave because, you know, if your head is filled with anxiety or your body's filled with pain and you keep showing up and you keep searching, then you know, that is inspiring to me. I don't know, I want to cry right now, but it's, you know, we all have this incredible resilience. Nobody is any more resilient than anybody else. We all have it. It's our innate well-being. It's just sometimes we get caught up in our thinking and then we think that we're not well. We think that we're broken, but it's not true because it's just an illusion. And when I see people break through that illusion and be willing to show up, despite what's going on with them, that is inspiring to me. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. And so I would like to get into this episode, but first I really want to hear about how you went from working on big Hollywood movies to coaching women about hormone distress. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, that you know, I used to wonder that myself sometimes because yeah, the Hollywood thing was, I actually worked in special effects. My speciality was making copies of real animals. And I actually was in Australia for 6 months working on the movie Babe. I don't know if you remember the talking pig movie, right? So we shot that just outside Sydney. And so my speciality was making copies of real animals. So like, for example, in Babe, people say, there's no puppets in Babe. I go, does your dog talk? Right? No, and they say it's computers. I'm like, not in 1993, it wasn't. We made actual puppets, copies of the real animal, and it would cut from the real animal to my puppet, and you won't know the difference. So my whole career was about convincing you that things were real that weren't, like the fact that animals could talk, or that Harry Potter can fly. Well, Harry Potter can fly, but Daniel Radcliffe can't. So we put him on roads and stuff. And so it's all an illusion. And our minds have a better special effects department than anything me or Steven Spielberg could come up with. So our minds are creating illusions all the time. So, and our body, like pain, for example, and hormone fluctuations are special effects produced by the mind. So that's how I see it goes together.
Amazing. First of all, like, I'm mind blown already speaking to like the Babe double maker. And so awesome. I can't wait to tell my kids about that because they love that movie. So that's really cool. What an awesome career, but such a different one from what you're in now. Because I know you've gone on and you've studied psychology and all of those things as well to get where you are. So specifically on PMDD, I would love to open that up. So for those listening who aren't familiar with the term, PMDD stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So would you like to explain more about what it is exactly?
Yes. So PMDD is like the worst kind of premenstrual tension you could think of. A lot of the women I've spoken to are almost suicidal. They I'm not a big fan of the diagnosis, but to get the diagnosis, you'd have to identify those mood swings and terrible anxieties and depressions and also physical stuff as well that coincided with the monthly cycle. So that's what differentiates it from, for example, borderline personality disorder or general anxiety disorder or PTSD. You can see the ups and downs of the mood swings are going with the ups and downs of your monthly cycle. That's what specifically makes it PMDD.
Yeah, and specifically in the luteal phase, from sort of ovulation to bleed and through bleed for some women as well. And I think just in the way that it differs from PMS, I sometimes refer to it as like PMS, but on steroids. And there's it's huge, isn't it? So you can still get all those physical signs and symptoms, obviously, with the bloating and the tender breasts and the migraines, but there's such a huge psychological component with PMDD, which I'd really love to dive in with you about. And the other thing to note with PMDD is there's not a true understanding of exactly the cause, but the thought behind it is the sensitivity or heightened sensitivity to the fluctuations in hormones. And later research is really suggesting that it's the progesterone. And usually for most of us, progesterone is a very calming sort of hormone. It can help with a lot of these wonderful things. But for women with PMDD, they've got that heightened sensitivity. It can cause a lot of emotional disturbances. So are there any other signs and symptoms you can think of in relationship to PMDD and how it differs from PMS?
I can't answer that question so much because I'm not a doctor and I never actually personally had PMDD, but I would love to get into what you just said about it, because that's really the main core of my book, and the research that's in the middle of the book kind of goes a little bit further upstream than what we've just described. So I'd love to share that
component. Yes, please.
Exactly. Right. So when I was researching, like, my books are novels, I find that stories are a great way to capture people's attention. If you're tired and overwhelmed, do I want to read another textbook or another self-help book? So this one is about a woman who's going into perimenopause and menopause. But her two daughters, one has PMDD and one has postpartum depression. So between the three of them, they cover every hormonal distress that we often go through. So as I was researching this, I found this amazing video, which sadly has been taken off of YouTube. I'm desperately trying to get hold of the professor who gave this lecture. But her name is Dr. Susan Girdler, and she's a professor of reproductive mood disorders at North Carolina University. And she conducted research because, like you were saying, with the luteal phase and the follicular phase and all these things, like what is actually going on with us. So she decided to get two groups of women. One group had a diagnosis of PMDD. It was a large group. And the other group had what she called healthy, which I kind of find that a bit objectionable, that, you know, to say that people are not. Anyway, that's another conversation. Anyway, so she did hormone testing. Excuse me. So what I've learned is a blood test does not work for hormone testing. It's not reliable because a blood test only tells you what has happened the moment the needle went in your arm. You need to do a urine test. And you need to do it over a period of a few days. So she p-tested both groups of women. And now, before I tell you the results, if you'd asked me back in my teens and my 20s, you know, what was going on with me each month, I would have said something like, oh, my hormones are, you know, out of whack this month, or, you know, my hormones are driving crazy, or my hormones are, you know, just like, you know, malfunctioning somehow. I had this idea that there was something wrong with the malfunction, you know, there was malfunctioning hormones. That's what I thought was happening. You know, why some women get it and some women don't, why it's worse some months and not others. So to go back to the research, she tested them and their hormone levels were pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. The women with PMDD and the women who she was calling healthy, women who didn't have a diagnosis. So being a good doctor, she got curious. Why was the group of, you know, women with PMDD reacting, having a different reaction, different experience with their monthly cycle than the other women? So she surveyed them. Now, it wasn't 100%, but the large majority of the women with the PMDD diagnosis had a history of abuse, trauma, or some kind of prolonged stressful thinking and anxiety. And then in the lecture, she goes into how that can alter the way the brain processes everything. Because if you've gone through, you know, child abuse or some kind of, you know, violence or something in your childhood or your teens and early 20s, whilst the brain is still developing, then it's going to make us, I don't like to say overreactive because that doesn't sound kind. I'd say hyperreactive, like oversensitize us to all kinds of things. Like you mentioned, I was mugged 3 times in my 20s. So my nervous system got very alert to certain sounds, like the sounds of footsteps behind me. My nervous system would overreact for many years afterwards. Thank God it went away. So what she was pointing to was that if your nervous system is revved up like this, and then you have a regular monthly cycle, because it's normal to go up and down, you know, our hormones fluctuate. That's why it's called a cycle, right? But to the women who are oversensitized, that drop in progesterone or estrogen, whatever's going on, is like a trauma. It's like another thing to deal with. Oh my gosh. And then from my understanding of experience and psychology and how experience is created, what I started seeing when I talked to women who were going through this is that, let's say they had a terrible time last month, and you know next month is coming. Right? It's not like a fight with your boss or your sister where you like, you know, it might never happen again. You know next month is coming. So women start getting anticipating this nightmare that's gonna come, you know, it's coming at you. And so they get tense and anxious. So they're already setting off the fight or flight response before they've even had the physical ups and downs of the cycle. And they're already revved up, you know, waiting for this trauma to happen. And then, you know, so when it does, the natural fluctuation is happening, it's like they're on a roller coaster and, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this again. We're hyperreacting. And then this just becomes a life. And some of the women I spoke to, they only have like 2 or 3 days in the middle of their cycle when they're not dealing with this huge, horrible onslaught of mental and emotional, you know, reactions, as well as the physical stuff. And I can tell you, the women who've read my manuscript when I was writing this, their symptoms started to go away. Because when you understand what's happening, you know, when you know what's something's happening, it takes away so much of the fear and the anticipation. And they start to be able to ride the wave of normal fluctuations with a lot less anxiety and a lot more peace and dignity. So it's amazing what understanding can do, and insight is really powerful.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Just is to become really self-aware. And that's what I think really helps you do, is to become really self-aware of yourself, your hormones and the fluctuations. And I love how you said that, you know, our hormones fluctuating is normal. We will feel some changes. Like, I think out there it's been sort of perceived that we should just have this sort of flatline effect all cycle, and if we have any little sort of up or down, we're not in balance, but it's absolutely not true. Like, I've said, I think in another episode actually, like if you look at the graph of our hormones and where they peak and where they drop and all of the events that have to happen for a cycle to happen, it's up and down. It looks like a picture of a roller coaster. So we have to expect that we're going to feel some shifts in our mood, in our body over that period of time. And the other really important thing to point out is, just as you had alluded to through this study, is that for a woman to have PMDD, they do not need to have a hormonal imbalance. Because it's a sensitivity to the fluctuation in normal hormones, normal fluctuations. It's not to say that someone with PMDD cannot also have a hormonal imbalance coinciding, because that can happen. And the other thing to note here is a lot of women believe a hormonal imbalance is estrogen versus progesterone. And as we get into perimenopause, we know that our progesterone drops, there's different fluctuations, bigger gaps. But a lot of the time, it's actually an imbalance between the stress hormones and the sex hormones. And that's exactly what you're talking about on this psychological level. If you've got this chronic stress, which causes chronic inflammation in the body, there's going to be heightened sensitivity and signs and symptoms. So 100% bringing all that back into a nice little bundle. Agree with everything you said. And I know that you speak about your 3 principles of the mind-body connection, and I'd love to dive into that and how that applies to PMDD and PMS. And also, when researching your latest book, you say that you came across this research that proved we are always feeling our thinking. And this is what you also mentioned in the questions earlier on. So I'd love to also speak about that. Like, what do you mean about feeling what you're thinking? I think I've thrown a lot out there, so let's talk.
It's brilliant, and I'm impressed that you got all that. This is my favorite thing to talk about, so thank you. Yes, when I've been, like I said, coaching people for 30 years, and I've done lots of different modalities and techniques and stuff, and I had chronic pain that whole time, and I was constantly going to the chiropractor. I had IBS, I had asthma, eczema, you name it, and I now know that they are all stress related. I didn't know that then, because when I go to doctors who were doing their best, they would say, oh, it's because of your injuries. It's because of your, you've got one leg longer than the other or something. They would always give me a medical reason. And I go, okay, because I'm not a doctor. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, I came across this new paradigm in psychology called the 3 principles, which is put together by the Sydney Banks, who I quoted at the beginning. And basically what he was saying is that we are all innately well. We all have innate well-being, that you cannot be broken and you don't need fixing. And I'm like, but I spent my whole life trying to fix myself. I'm like, and then when I saw what we're pointing to is insights, a shift in thinking, because the only reason people don't think that they're well or they need fixing is because they've got caught up in their personal mind and personal thinking. So what Sid was pointing to was that thought is a spiritual energy. And I always start moving my hands around at this point because I don't know the words to describe spiritual energy, but it's some kind of formless, creative, loving, infinite energy that comes through our minds. And it's formless over here, but when it comes into my little mind, my little personal screen, if you like, it takes a form. And that form can be thinky thoughts, like do the laundry. No, I don't want to, but it can also take the form of sounds like music. And like sometimes you can hear a tune in your head. There's no words, but it's just music. That's also the general gift of thought. It can be images, I'm picturing a beach right now, it's like, there's no words, but that's how we experience everything. And it can include sensations, so when I started working with people with physical issues, and by the way, my 25 years of pain went away when I started understanding this. And I think it went away because my thinking slowed down. When I started understanding how experience is created, the world became a lot less frightening place. Like when I was in Hollywood, I had so much insecurity and anxiety, making a mistake. What do people think of me? I got to do it right, got to do it perfect. Can you see I start speeding up when I talk about that? So to slow down, when I started slowing down, my nervous system got the message I was safe. And so it didn't need to produce the pain anymore. And even my menopause symptoms went away. The hot flushes and the brain fog and all that stuff went away, as well as my back pain and my IBS and all that stuff, because my nervous system knew I was safe. So the fact that I'm feeling safer thinking is what created a safer place in my body. If, you know, it's actually a very reliable system. If you're thinking miserable, anxious, grumpy, you know, kind of thinking, you cannot be in a good mood. And the reverse is true. If you're thinking happy, abundant, joyful thinking, you can't be in a bad mood. And I used to be terrified of my moods. But I know now that my moods are actually a reflection of the quality of my thinking. They're like a barometer. They're actually very useful. So if I start feeling any kind of tenseness, heaviness, maybe even urgency, then I know that, like, if you think of moods like an elevator or a lift in a building going up and down, I know I've just jumped on the down, the going down to the basement. The basement would be my body screaming at me, like, you know, when I was having terrible pain or dizziness, tinnitus, or Americans call it tinnitus, you know, ringing in your ears, migraines. All these things are like the body's wisdom shouting at us to get our attention to slow down. But most of us innocently, and I stress innocently, don't understand the signals. And so we think there's something wrong with the body, and then we start getting more stressed about that. You can see it's a vicious cycle. But it can also go the other way. When you understand what's happening, when you understand that every thought you've ever had, whether it be a heartbreak, an anxiety, or even joyful things too, is constantly moving. Thought is an energy, and as Einstein told us, energy is always moving. It might morph into different forms, but it's always moving. So I've learned that even if I have a funky thought, or I have could even have a crazy inappropriate thought, there's no need to get frightened by it, because it's going to move. And learn not to be frightened by, like you said, like a normal fluctuation in our hormones, or a hot flush, or a crazy insecure thought, like, you know, nobody likes me, I'm fat and I'm ugly. What? Shut up. You're not listening, right? It's like, it's just moving through. We all have crazy thoughts. It doesn't mean you're crazy. So when I learned that I didn't have to listen to those thoughts, I felt safer. I became an observer of them. And I can tell you that they kind of really calmed down, that my thinking is pretty sane and calm these days, so much so that when I do get a wacky thought, I can see it and it's so ridiculous, I don't need to listen to it. So my health is so much improved because my mental state is so much better. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're so on the same page, and to break through the barrier of really healing and trusting yourself. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so what do you say to people that are, or women in particular, that are worried that they've been given this PMDD diagnosis and that's it? Like they think they're going to be having these symptoms all of the time.
Yeah. So my opinion, and it's purely my opinion based on 30-something years of talking to people, is that labels and diagnoses are really a construct. They may describe how you were on that day. It's not who you are. One of my teachers is a psychologist. She says, it's like, imagine your worst hair day. You've just gotten over the flu. You've got a pimple on the end of your nose. Someone at work got a promotion whilst you were out sick. And someone took a picture of you and said, okay, this is going to be your ID photo for the rest of your life. And you're like, no, that was just how I was on that day. So yes, it may have described how we are sometimes, or even like a few days of the month, but it's not who you are. And so the women I've worked with so far, when they started to understand how experience is created and how thought is always moving, and thought is neutral until we have that reaction to it. When you understand something, when you get an insight, a shift in your thinking, then like I said, the nervous system calms down. And I've seen it. I've got some testimonials on my website from women who had a diagnosis of PMDD, and she was even going into perimenopause. So it was like coming at it from all directions, and her symptoms have pretty much gone away. And we didn't do anything. That's the amazing thing. Like, that's why I say, like, you can't be broken, because we're actually this formless energy. Like you were saying, like before thought, before form, we're this, and you can't break formless, right? You cannot break a formless thing. Like you can't break a cloud. We can only feel broken when we're caught up in the illusion. So when they saw through the illusions of their thinking, the special effects that was creating, then they saw that there was actually nothing to fix, therefore nothing to do other than understanding. And then when you understand, like I loved how you were describing it, when we're at a higher level of consciousness, you're naturally going to eat better, sleep better, take care of yourself. Your natural innate wisdom is going to be there for you. It's always there. And we can tap into it more when we're in a better state of mind, you know, less contaminated by all that stinky thinking. And then they just naturally flourish, because in our best mind, that's who we really are. We are wellness when we're not caught up in all the stinky thinking. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to note that, like, any thought that we think has a subtle impression on our body, because our mind and our body are so intricately connected, we can't separate the two. It's just like if you feel in your body, then you think a thought in your mind. So if you're feeling like pain, you know, it registers in your mind that you've got pain. But any thought that you think also has a reaction in the body, but also mental and emotional armor. And that can keep us really locked up. And it goes again to what you said about emotional energy. Like, emotions are energy in motion, but they can become a little bit stuck if we don't have ways of expressing and freeing them. So there's so many ways to address our health that's just not on that physical surface level. I'm curious with the way you address the psychology of hormones, PMDD, PMS. Do you have a certain process with your counseling, coaching?
The way I understand how, you know, the psychology and the way experience is created, I work with people with all kinds of chronic pain, like I said, like back pain and stomach issues and migraines. And I also work with people in business, or work with people in, you know, dealing with angry teenagers, or, you know, because when you understand how the mind works, we take this mind with us everywhere, into everything. So the basic principles that I'm sharing with people are amazing, because the woman who recovered from PMDD by reading my book, she messaged me the other day saying she's getting on so much better with her husband, right? We didn't say anything about her husband. We didn't talk about relationships at all, but because she's now in a better state of mind, her relationship with her husband is better. She has her own business. She's an artist. So she's selling more paintings now because she's more available. She's more in the moment. So I have a 10-hour program that I do with people. And in the first session, we will go over some of the, you know, physical pain research. Like, one of my favorite pain researchers is an Australian pain researcher called Lorimer Moseley. I don't know if you know that name, but one of the first things I heard him say was, we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness, which is kind of like what you were just saying. You know, it's like we're experiencing everything through our thinking. So I explain how the mind, body, and the pain, you know, all that goes together, including the hormone stuff. And then pretty much the rest of the time, we're having a discussion about these three principles, which, if in case anybody's curious, it's mind, thought, and consciousness. Thought being this creative energy I've spoken a lot. Consciousness is our moods going up and down. And mind was Sid Banks's way of saying the source of everything, the wisdom of the universe. Everybody has different words for that, whether you call it God or higher power or infinite wisdom, Allah, Buddha. It really doesn't matter what we call it. The fact that there's an initial source of wisdom that we're all experiencing and we're all blessed by. And I find that's why so many people have anxiety, and particularly health anxiety, is because we're trusting on our finite selves. And you know, when I have to put willpower into a, you know, to make, you know, do exercise and do that diet and, you know, make it, force it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm flaky. Sooner or later, I'm going to get tired. Sooner or later, it's going to be too cold to go to the gym, or, you know, but what we're pointing at is insight. We're going further upstream and saying, can you see how it works? Can you see this true to be true for you? And when people see it to be true, that insight is far more powerful than any willpower thing that I can put together. And it's more longer lasting. And so most of my sessions are conversations like this, where we're talking backwards and forwards and having a like transformational conversation. And sometimes I see people's faces go, oh my gosh, I just realized I've been torturing myself with my own thinking, or they just suddenly realize that was, they've been carrying around a story in their head since their childhood, which is very heavy. And you just see their faces change. It's incredible. Sometimes people get the session, the insight while they're driving home, or, you know, later on in the market or something, you know, and those shifts accumulate. And then, my gosh, then, you know, the monthly cycle goes, or a fight with the husband or the boss, and they don't react like they used to. I love how you said they respond. We stop reacting and we start responding, and you're responding from wisdom, that innate wisdom that's always there. So most of my work is conversational. And, you know, I have lots of resources and videos for, you know, people to see if they're interested, but I find that transformational conversation is far more powerful than do this, don't do that, you know, because we flake and we give up, and insight is gonna, you know, last much longer.
100%. Insight is the most powerful transformation that you can have, and the perspective is so different now. And yeah, it's wonderful. And it's such a huge part to healing, is really that psychological healing. So thank you so much for sharing all that wisdom. It's so valuable. I did have,
you know, I really believe the body has its own innate wisdom, and it lets us know what we need if we're able to slow down enough to listen. And in fact, I made a little meme once, and it said, if you can hear your body whisper, you won't have to listen to it scream.
100%.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd love to hear more about your books. So the latest book in particular, but yeah, give us a little rant about all of the books and where we can find them.
Sure. So the first one is called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem. And that was, I thought, was going to be my only book. So I threw all my good stories in there. So there's this, it is a novel. I have like an alter ego. She's called Deborah. So it starts with her childhood and the anxieties in her childhood, goes through the traumas I went through with the muggings and the injuries. It goes a little bit through my Hollywood career, and then finding these 3 principles and these ideas and how my PTSD symptoms went away. Then the second one is called Painless, and it focuses on chronic pain. And by chronic pain, that includes all kinds of physical issues, not just, you know, your regular back pain. And it's kind of starts in Australia, because that's where I was filming Babe, and it kind of picks up from there. And it is fiction. I'd say about, you know, 50% of it is true, in that the examples that I use with the different physical issues are coming from actual clients I've worked with. So I put them together in a fictional clinic, and there's lots of drama, and there's some romance, and there's a happy ending. And then the more recent one, this just came out like 2 weeks ago. This one's called Very Well. The subtitle is A Novel About Hormones, Women, and Why Freud Was Wrong. And if you're curious, this on the front, the cover, this lady is Bertha Pappenheim. She was, that's her real name. Her pseudonym was Anna O. She was one of Freud's first clients. And Freud claimed to cure her of hysteria, which is absolutely not true. There's lots of facts now to show that she ended up in a sanitarium in Switzerland, addicted to morphine after he abandoned her. And she went on to become a social worker, and she built orphanages. She traveled around from Russia to New York to Jerusalem, helping women who had been, forced into prostitution, orphans. She got them homes and jobs. She did such amazing stuff. Like just when the war was breaking out in Germany, she took a bunch of children from Nazi Germany to Glasgow in Scotland at the age of 70. She was interrogated by the Gestapo, and she stood up, and like nobody's heard of her. You know, so I kind of put her story in between all the other stuff, the drama that's going on. So this one is set in Los Angeles, and it got to Amazon #1 bestseller in the Freud section. Thank you to Amazon's algorithms for that. I'll take that little win. So why not? So so this one just came out just a couple of weeks ago, and in February. So that one one of the main characters has PMDD, and her symptoms start to go away when she understands, she sees that she has innate well-being, and that her understanding of what's actually happening reduces the fear and stress in her life. And then the mother and daughter go on to help a lot of other women with all kinds of other hormonal situations. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun writing these books, and I get so much it's amazing feeling when women write to me and tell me that it's helping them and their symptoms are going away, and it's improving their relationships and their lives, and bringing joy back into their lives once they return to their good health. So yeah, it's a real honor and privilege to write these books. And yeah, and they're all on Amazon, so you can either look by the titles or by my name, Hannah Studley. You'll find them on Amazon.
And Hannah is spelled with a CH. So just for those people, Hana, Studley. That book sounds so amazing. And I love how you've made it into a novel, like a story. It is so much more intriguing. You get a little bit over just reading the sort of same textbooks and or text styles book, like information books. So I think it sounds so amazing. Like, well done. I think, it's going to be amazing. I'm so glad that it hit #1 for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. And for anyone who is listening, if you love the type of work that me and Hannah do, like helping women with their health, but thank you so much for coming on board here and having a wonderful chat with us. It's been so insightful. I love the work you do, love the books, and I hope everyone listening goes and gets themselves a copy and learn more about themselves and the way that our hormones interact with our mental health and our emotional health, and how emotional mental health reacts with our hormones. It's just all part of being women, and it's all part of being able to understand ourselves on that deeper level, so we can really step into our higher self in all areas of our lives. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.